so much. I love you so much. I love you so much. I love you so much.
Hello, all you positive heads out there. Thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into another episode of the Positive Head Podcast, where we are firmly convinced that creating success and happiness is rooted in understanding the ultimate nature of reality and the fact that as human beings, we are all immensely powerful fractals of the one and only source consciousness, which creates and animates all things. Now, of course, understanding this powerful truth is one thing. Applying this incredibly empowering wisdom to everyday life, well, that's another, which is exactly why we provide you with a fresh serving of soul food for thought 5 days a week to help constantly remind you of what matters most. You are it. And I'm your host, Brandon Beecham. I'm the one who will be here with you each and every Wednesday, interviewing a different consciousness changemaker that is also out there working tirelessly to help catalyze change and expand awareness all across spaceship Earth. On the other 4 weekdays, you can hear me discussing topics such as my favorite thought-provoking quotes, reading and discussing wisdom from empowering books, playing clips from various inspirational spiritual teachers, sharing a bit of mysterious news, taking questions from the audience, and essentially digging into any other mind-expansive topics that will help keep your soul fed by tuning you into positive vibrations on a consistent basis. And you guys have heard me say that if I ever run ads on the show, it will only be with a company that I fully support because I believe their intention is to make a positive difference in the world. Well, I'm pleased to announce that day has arrived and that this episode of the Positive Head Podcast is being brought to you thanks to the support of Gaia. If you're not familiar, Gaia is the go-to source for streaming consciousness content online. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. All right, all you positive heads. On this week's interview episode, I'm very happy to have Michael Mirdad here with me on the show. Michael is a world-renowned spiritual teacher and best-selling author who has worked as an intuitive healer and counselor for over 35 years. Hey there, Michael. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me on.
It's such a pleasure to have you on. Been looking forward to this for some time, and I'm going to jump right in and start. I always start with the same question and end with the same question. You're in an elevator. The guy next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You got 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
Being the presence of God on earth as best I can.
Oh, I like that one. All right. Fair enough. Well, we're going to dive into what exactly you mean by that. I suppose before we get into all the juicy details of being the presence of God on earth, why don't you give us a little bit of your background, your story? How did you end up doing this, this unique work that you're doing?
Well, I've always said that there's a couple of different ways that people end up more consciously on the spiritual path. I mean, first of all, like a lot of times when I meet people or when I'm speaking with audiences, I say, do you remember when you got on the spiritual path and what got you on the path? And people have quite a variety of answers. Yes, I remember getting on the path in 1988 and so on. And I was doing this, or I was going through a dark time. Somebody gave me a book, all these varying answers.
Sure.
When the truth is we're always on the spiritual path in that we all have a spirit in us. Therefore, every path we walk is a spiritual path, whether it's drug addiction or spiritual devotion. I mean, it could be yoga. It could be you can be a construction worker. Every path is a spiritual path by default because you are a spiritual being. So every path you walk is spiritual, but it's not always a conscious participation that we, share. So for me, I've always said that people get on the path. We're always on the path, but when people become conscious participants, it's usually either a kind of a dramatic wake-up call, or some of us just kind of always felt it or an interest in it. And even though my family might have been a bit more traditional, religion or whatever it might be. I always felt a little more happening inside of me. I always had an interest. I'm old enough to where, I can say back in those days,
right.
There weren't metaphysical stores left and right. There were not. There were only a few in the country, and you used to have to go to standard bookstores to even hope to find anything on philosophy, let alone metaphysics. And nothing was written in those days. The only few books written was Jonathan Livingston Seagull. If you can go back that far, it's only a few things were written. So
Sure.
they're really other than older like occultism, but you just couldn't find a lot. And so I always had that interest. Anything I could see, any book I could cross the path, would cross my path. You'd find things like Edgar Cayce, of course, or Nostradamus predictions. Sure. Anything I could find, I'd get into. So technically, my answer is I've always been into this, but definitely around the age of 20 is when I started teaching my first workshops. I took a few classes here and there, and I thought, God, this is great being around these kinds of people. Just what a cool thing to be around spiritual people, just like yoga people, like hanging out at yoga centers. I loved it, and I get excited as soon as I start talking. You can hear it in my voice. It was so cool just to be around other people interested in spirituality. I loved it, so I went and took classes just to be around other people like that. But also, learning a little this and that. In those days, the standard, you could take tarot classes or classes on various varying kinds of spirituality. Because of course there wasn't, again, all the books we now have. So you would have courses like study groups on Edgar Cayce or so on and so on. But then eventually, A Course in Miracles came out around that time. So that became a bit of a popular thing because that came out way back. People don't realize it came out way back in the 70s even. So that became a popular kind of a study group. So I was just into anything and everything and started teaching. And in a nutshell, career-wise, I was teaching, but had to have side jobs here and there to make it because there weren't centers. There were no churches or spiritual centers or yoga centers in those days that you could tour to, quote unquote tour to and teach. So so I just did what I could. Living room, my living room of my apartment to the few centers that were out there. I started teaching at those in the 80s. And then it just grew. And really, and it's a piece of advice to people that do this kind of thing. We really, you can't just become an author and say, I'm going to go teach. I didn't write a book for, oh my God, I don't even know. It must have been maybe almost at least 15 years, maybe 20 of teaching. And people would ask me, I was with Greg Braden once, and he said, Michael, when are you going to write a book? And I just said, we were at a conference speaking, and I said, Greg, this is 15 years ago, 20 years ago. I said, Greg, I don't have to. I'm already actually out there. I've been touring. These guys were new, Greg and Doreen Virtue. They were kind of new at writing 20 years ago. And they were like, well, they had to write a book and then go on tour like a rock band. You go on tour to promote.
Right.
And I said, believe it or not, I'm actually already out there. I'm already on tour and in demand. People book me all the time. So I don't really need to write one. So I never had the time. I don't know how to type. That can be a bit of an issue, but I don't know how to type. And so it was kind of a funny answer. I thought, wow, that's right. Then I finally did, within a few years of that, I finally did write my first and then go on from there. But I've been touring for a long time, teaching for a long time. And one of the odd things is that the topics will really, the topics are in the hundreds, because it's any topic from healing to relationship to whatever. And they started manifesting as books. And so just, being an author is another part of the path I've been on. But I'll close with clarifying that what I have become and doing this all these years, I make a distinction, and I say this to students on the path. Please know the difference. It's not that it's that big of a deal, but please know the difference between an author and a spiritual teacher. A spiritual teacher might write a book, but teaching is their first priority. They might write them and they might sell them and they might make money off books, but teaching is their first love.
Right.
Where an author writing and selling is their first love. And so they might have something cool to tell you, but understand that they are authors first. And just learn the difference, because a lot of people have made spiritual teachers out of authors, and that doesn't go well. It doesn't go well because authors do not have the same bar of lifestyle or integrity. And I'm not saying they don't have integrity. I'm saying they don't have to really, it's not their lifestyle. They might just have something great to say, and in a way to say it, they know how to say it in a book. But I really, don't compare Jesus, Buddha, Moses, whomever, Mother Teresa, or whomever you admire. Don't compare spiritual teachers with your authors of today, because the spiritual teachers of today are becoming fewer and fewer. And what I love is what I'm seeing is the spiritual teachers, the ones that are authors, they are consistently falling and failing. Major yoga, some of the yoga leaders in this country that own these major retreats and they teach yoga again and again, the idols keep falling because they end up fooling around with their students and so on, So it's just one of those things, where I just go, no, I don't really want to mix in with that. I want to feel like, I want to live more like a spiritual, leader.
Right. Yeah, no, I can relate to that, being very, much newer on my path. Actually, our stories are very similar, very strict conservative Christian upbringing, around 20 or so, started, really waking up to other ideas. Now, I would talk about it and felt very called to sort of teach, but it really didn't take hold really until the show, where it was sort of a everyday, in this case, 5 days a week, I do a show, teaching, or, one day a week, I do an interview like this. And, it's interesting that you bring that up, because I started on a book, and and I actually have always been a writer too. I started writing and had things published at a young age. So I feel I have an affinity for writing, but not nearly as much as sort of the organic, flow of sort of teaching. What's coming through me in a given moment? What am I inspired to say? What sort of, with the show, there'll be synchronicities all the time. Like, oh, this question was asked, and then this happened to me, and then this person wrote in, and it turns into this sort of like organic freestyle, sort of experience. Whereas writing, I have like a love-hate with it. I'm good at it, but it's almost like agonizing for me at the same time. So it's interesting that you bring that up, because I really resonate with a lot, not only of your background and story, with sort of my own path, of course, but feeling very much called. And I even saw someone recently posting this. Who was I want to say it was Christopher Ryan. He does a podcast, and he was talking about writing books and how much more he enjoys podcasting, but he has to write to pay the bills, and sort of this back and forth. That. This relationship between the two, and so I can definitely relate to what you're saying.
Yeah, it is.
And I think others can too.
Well, it's a process. Like the reason there are starving artists, quote unquote, that's such a popular archetype, is because artists are more in their upper chakras, having creative flow happening, but they haven't yet integrated the lower chakras enough to ground themselves to be successful and yet creative. Ultimately, we're supposed to be balanced. We're supposed to be able to be creative and grounded. We're supposed to be able to be, inspired and yet wonderful partners and lovers. We're supposed to be healthy and yet intellectual. We should have all these things available within us, all these aspects of higher archetypes, and that includes to be somebody who could make a good living, to be prosperous, but yet have integrity. It's a weird thing to have been around as long as I have on this path and in this market, so to speak, and see the difference, from one to another. And I'm glad I saw that and was able to tell folks about it, just so that it eases the mind, because some people they get not knowing that there's a difference between spiritual leaders and authors. Spiritual teachers and authors, to realize I was watching how people were constantly upset and crashing because their author was was sometimes some of those biggest authors, I'm talking about the few biggest in the world, a couple of them have used ghostwriters to help them get more books out. And people don't realize that. Or
right.
These authors show up in their limousines, their red carpet out to the stage, they speak, they get, $20, $30, $40,000 for a lecture, a couple hours lecture. And then they split. They're gone. They're at the airport. They're gone. There's no interaction with the audience. There's no real actual.
It's a job more than a labor of love, sort of.
Yeah, and it's not even a job in terms of labor. It's more of just a prosperous machine that they're part of. And it's really delicate to say that because I don't want to. I'm not dissing prosperity because we've done that enough on this planet, But
absolutely.
I'm saying that people have been confused by that. They say, well, what's this about? Why is this guy teaching about the spirituality or philosophy or whatever it happens to be, or forgiveness or Ayurveda or whatever topic, and yet they've got like 5 houses and they, I don't really get that. I think it's kind of lame. I think that if you've got that much money and you've made that much money, I think congratulations, and maybe rent a house if you want to go stay somewhere in the summer or something. But I don't quite believe that you have to have houses you don't ever visit. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's a good statement, but it is if you're just an author. But then tell your students that. Tell your readers, hey, I'm just an author. I don't have really, my lifestyle is like a typical wealthy person because I've sold a lot of books, and just kind of own that, I guess, if your audience does ask or care. I think that if you're a spiritual leader, a teacher, I think, there's a bar that we're held up to, and it's a very delicate topic that we don't have to continue much on. But I'm just saying that as for some people, they don't care. They're going, hey, I can do what I want. I'm an adult. I'm a spiritual teacher. So what? I'll do what I want. I'll be wealthy. I'll be this. I'll use prostitutes. In hotels like the televangelists have often been caught doing. I kind of have this thing where I kind of go, well, isn't there something we should sort of live up to? And then the downside of what I'm saying is then people say, well, Michael, you end up taking spirituality too seriously because it's not your responsibility to care what other people think about what you do with money and whether or not you're faithful to your word or whatever it happens to be. And maybe I am. Maybe I am too serious about it. But by being that way, without being strict about it, by being that way that I am, it feels like I'm constantly growing higher as a consciousness, as an integrity, as a person. So what I'm doing is I'm becoming the presence that we talk about. Instead of just telling about it and not living it, I feel like it helps me become that. But by saying, just to close, as a spiritual leader, I've been for years. They asked me to come and be the spiritual leader at Unity of Sedona. And so I do that. I also still tour and guests come there too, but I'm one of the main parts there, as the spiritual leadership. And I just tell them, folks, hi there. Nice to meet you when I first arrived. Nice to meet you all. Let's be really clear. I'm here to teach. You can count on me to teach. You do not ask me out. I'm not interested. Don't ask me out. Don't ask me for tea. I'm here. I have no actual, commitment in terms of it's not relationship. It's not religion. It's nothing that keeps me in the style of living that I have. It's me that's choosing. Don't ask me out. I don't want to know anything about money at this center. Let the board take care of it. I don't want anything that the usual ministers, because if you can believe it, lots of ministers in churches and spiritual centers. There's lots of swiping of money and little stories of affairs and this and that. I'm like, hey, don't ask me out. Don't do this. Just let really, really clean. Let's make this different than anything else you've ever heard of.
Right.
And it's kind of cool because I challenge them to challenge me. I said, if you ever see me, misbehaving, around town, call me on it because I don't want any games and I don't want to be like the typical, such and such is out there in the world. So I challenge them to challenge me so that when they do, I'm constantly being held to a higher bar of integrity. And in that, they get a teacher that has a greater consciousness and integrity, which means they grow, and we have this ecosystem that's rising into higher consciousness. And that, in my opinion, is what all the yogis should do, the spiritual leaders should do, and so on, because it's not just a behavioral like checks and balances, because I'm not saying that. I'm saying that it's an actual choice of spiritual evolution.
Gotcha. Okay, well, that's I definitely admire your the authenticity of your path. And what I'm curious about is, okay, so you've been at that, and obviously this isn't something you've decided today. This is something you've put a lot of yourself and time and energy into embodying this persona, right? And living it. And so what I'm curious to hear about, and I know the listeners are as well, what did that yield? What have we learned? Where has this taken you? And you've, of course, written several books, as we've touched on. And of course, the great thing about a book, or sort of a focal point of a particular realization, right? That's essentially what it is. Let's touch on some of that. Why don't we go and talk about a little bit of some of your books? There's quite a few of them, so maybe we won't get to all of them, but there was a few of them that jumped out to me. And so I what I'll do is, for example, Healing the Heart and Soul. Now, I know you identify as an intuitive healer. I'd like to hear what exactly that means and what it entails, and kind of what the gist of this book is.
All right, thank you. Well, I believe that we all are capable of, it's what I call, when people say to me, what is the primary purpose of your teachings, or the theme of your teachings or beliefs? I truly say, it's about becoming the divine beings that we are. It's about, but connect with God is step one. First and foremost, above and beyond all else, make spirituality, connecting with spirit, your first priority. And then becoming the presence of that. It's connect with spirit for guidance, and then become the thing you're connecting to. Like so often, again, we're praying to something up in the sky, or even if we are admiring or acknowledging or awakening some sort of a divine spark within, you still have to integrate it. So connect with spirit. Right. Connect, and whether you studied Buddhism, 12-step programs, or A Course in Miracles, all of those programs, 365 lessons of A Course in Miracles, 12 steps in the 12-step program, and lots of sutras and so forth, yantras and whatever, throughout Buddhism, depending on the system, they all can be distilled to three things. And, in Buddhism, it's, they're called tantras or sutras, but they can all be distilled to three things. And one is connect with the divine. 2, let that make a difference in you. And then 3, bring that difference to others. So I summarize that as God, self, and others. That's what it's all about. God, self, and others. There's only 3. The Sufis say you can only have 3 relationships, and they are with God, self, and others. And if you have all of those in harmony, that's the happy person, which is all totally true. And that's what all these other systems have been saying all along, but people don't realize. They get into the minutia of, step 1, step 2, lesson 1, lesson 500, whatever, and it's really 3 things. Come back to God, come back to spirit, connect with the divine in any way you want to call it, but connect with spirit as your source, as your priority, as your creator. And then let that make a difference in you as a person. Back to that integrity, right? Your total, personal awakening. Instead of theory, it becomes in you an awakening. 3, bring that to others. So when I've written books, they're sort of, in a way, you could say they could be grouped in sets, but the idea is, I call this living mastery. The reason I taught different topics is partly because the demand is there, people want to know, but also because I believe we're supposed to be diverse. I believe that you and I are, and everybody listening and everybody on the planet are supposed to learn to become just as creative as we are, grounded, et cetera, like I said a minute ago. Well, I myself, I'm intuitive and clairvoyant, yet I can write, yet I can do this or that or the other. When I teach, I often just start a 40-minute talk at a church, a 30-minute, 40-minute talk, it's just off the cuff. People will say, can you talk about ascension? And then off we go for the next little bit of time. And it's not like I've studied and read all the books. It just comes through me quite spontaneously, quite just off the cuff. And books are a way of taking all that creativity, spontaneity, and sometimes, education or whatever you want to call it, study and experience, and putting them into a book cover in between the page, in the pages of a book cover. So when I write a book, I try to write a complete thing so that, I'm not the type to write a book and then it sells, thousands of copies. And then I'm going, oh, well, what I got to do is write part 2 because that's a good hook to get the people to buy. I'm not into that. My thing is I'll just try to put everything I can about that topic in that book so you don't have to get part 2 and I don't have to write it, So it's a really different way of thinking for me than most people. But so I started writing with my first book was the 7 Initiations on the Spiritual Path. The subtitle, Understanding the Purpose to Life's Tests. So that book was about helping people understand how everything connects. It includes initiations of life. It includes technically how there's 7 and they're related to your chakras and everything, including the dark night of the soul, which we might come back to in a bit. We'll see. But, that book's kind of like an overview of much, but it's a great first book for me to write because it's kind of a great foundation for anybody on the path. And then you could say that's followed by, you're not going crazy, you're just waking up. Because when you're on the path, this, like in the first books described, you're realizing I'm having an awakening and there's nothing wrong with me. I'm actually waking up. I was insane. I was crazy. And the world is somewhat crazy because it doesn't realize what everything's actually all about. So that was the second. And then it goes into the one you mentioned, healing the heart and soul. Because now that you realize there's an awakening and there's challenges that happen while you're awakening, now you can learn what to do about it. You can, what I call tracking. I developed a technique that any issue that's coming up in your life, first time or repetitively, you can track it and find out the actual source inside in the soul. Because every kind of healing, whether it's the body or the neurology of the system, the nervous system, or meridians or aura or whatever, any kind of healing you do is really only to some level or another is symptomatic. Only healing the soul can really uproot the roots of whatever happened to manifest. And I'm not talking about just illness. I'm talking about financial blocks or relationship patterns or whatever. We are destined to get through that, but you can't heal. You can fix things, but you can't truly heal them without healing the soul. So that's kind of a series of that. That's a progression of those few books. And then I also went into a few books related to relationships, sacred sexuality, and so forth. My introduction to Tantra and sacred sexuality, or my book on relationships, which is called Creating Fulfilling Relationships. And that's about relationships with God, self, and others. As I said, the Sufi, the wise masters that said, those are the relationships in life, and you got to find a way to be healthy in those 3 relations. So that sort of helped direct my teachings about relationships. And it's interesting because a lot of people say, well, I just want to read a book about how to create a perfect partner. They don't want to do the work. They don't want to heal. They don't want to change their patterns. They just, oh, I'm sorry, I wanted to read a book that, how to get my soulmate, my perfect, quote unquote, other person. And mine would not be that book, because mine's going to be about healing you so that you can create a healed person that you might want to be a partner with. But you'll certainly lessen your neediness and your addictions, because that's not going to lead you to good places. And I've written books. One, taking all of those hundreds of pages of A Course in Miracles and distilling them down to the 12 major concepts in the Course, like love and forgiveness, peace, the inner peace, the getting in touch with God within, rather than having the constant voice of the ego prevailing in our day-to-day life. learning the difference between reality and illusion, the difference between the spiritual realm versus the material realm. So it's really taking all that and distilling it down to some very deep, powerful concepts. And I have a new one coming out, in fact, I think today, called The Book of Love and Forgiveness, taking all of that. If you think about it, ask anybody, what is forgiveness? They could be a Baptist, a Catholic, they could be a Buddhist, anybody, even an atheist knows the general definition. Forgiveness is thought to be, and the ritual, would differ from person to person, but the general definition would be, well, somebody's harmed you in some way and you decide to forgive them. And then you go, okay, but what do you mean with that? Forgive them. Well, you kind of overlook it, you let it go. That's the general, really loose definition. And that is not accurate at all. I mean, only very loosely could that even come close to accurate. Forgiveness is a process. And it's not like you just wave your hand and go, fine, I don't hate you anymore. Right. That doesn't mean you've forgiven the person. Right. Forgiveness is, there's two primary types. Forgiving others and forgiving yourself. And so my book goes into deep explanation, deep but not overwhelming, just deep and powerful explanation of, when you're ready, go ahead, start, here's some really powerful methods of forgiving others. That's great. And when you're ready, if ever you feel ready, we're also going to then go even deeper, because it's deeper to forgive yourself than others. So then there's a deepening to the place of, how to get to that place of forgiving yourself for the patterns, the belief systems inside. See, it starts off with me forgiving you because you were insensitive to me, you betrayed me, and so on. But when I realize I've had like 5 people abandon me, 10 people betray me, eventually I need to say, well, wait a minute. What is it in me that attracts these kinds of people? And if I can forgive and uproot that part of myself, technically those kinds of people won't even be attracted to me or drawn to me. So forgiving ourselves is very scary to some, and it takes quite a bit of courage. But that is where you discover immunity to problems rather than, constantly juggling it around and thinking, well, I have to keep forgiving hundreds of people per lifetime. We start to realize forgiving ourselves just a few times will lessen the other number, exponentially and dramatically.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And apparently you figured out how to type, because that's a lot. That's a lot of great content.
It is. It's like I said, it's diverse, and I don't know. Maybe I'm getting close to 10 books by now, and I'm working on another that I've worked on now for just the last couple weeks. And it's probably half done already. It'll be my next one. It'll be out in a few months. And that one's going to focus, on it'll be, instead of the book of love and forgiveness, it'll be the book of prayers and meditation. So it's going to be all like, let's get to it. Because I'm all about that. I'm like, let's get to it. Look, people are confused about this. I'm going to just teach about it. And I teach about it for years. And then eventually, let me just distill it into a book. That's how it kind of happens for me. Because people need to stop going in so many different directions to learn something, and let's just distill it down. Let's give them the answer. I mean, geez, if we as spiritual teachers, authors, or whatever we are, if we can't actually give them an answer, then we should just stop talking. We should stop writing if we don't really have the answers. It's just kind of silly because we're wasting their time. I understand. I mean, I'm being a bit extreme there, because every book could have a little something for somebody. I get that. I'm just saying that if you become one of the primary teachers on this planet, or in your country, or in your state, or whatever, please, let's have something to offer instead of just another and another and another talk on something. Every one of those should be effective. Like, let's make a difference instead of just, you're charismatic, or you dress a certain way, or you have been in that tradition for a while, so they admire you. Instead of just things gratuitously done, I'm like, man, let's live it, and let's show them and teach them how to actually do that to the highest level. Even Brendan, even when people come to me and say, well, I don't know if I should be believing this or believing that. One of my main things that I've learned as a teacher is I try to connect things and bridge things rather than, hey, my teaching's right, yours is wrong, or that teaching's right, this one's wrong. I try to say, well, you know what? Because, people are troubled and they say, look, my family says this, but I believe that. I try to teach people how to find common ground instead of differences. Anybody can create differences, and that's one reason we have an issue on planet Earth. But looking for common ground. See, so I can just feel and I can integrate so quickly material thoughts, teachings, channelings. Things can come to me. So if you say, Michael, a lot of my students are believers in ascended masters, but others angels. Which one is let's say, not that you would say this, but let's pretend you said, which one's the right one? Which one's the most powerful or effective? I could tell you the whole story. I could tell you exactly what vibration dimension angels are on and what vibration dimension masters are in and how they're different, why they're different. They're all correct. You don't pick one. They all have a different place.
Right.
Just like if I were advising, if you had an injury and you were trying to rehab your body, there's a time when you do physical therapy, a time for surgery, a time for yoga. Every one of these things have validity, and we need to learn to teach
integrate
the validity of everybody and everything. Everybody's valid and has something to offer. It's quite beautiful. So, it's a way to kind of bring things together, and it shortens the curve, the learning curve of spirituality. So I'm honoring both. I do believe everybody has something to offer, but I'm also saying I don't just look at it eclectically. I look at how to take the many and shorten the learning curve. See, so I am honoring the many, but if we only do the many teachings, then we're scattered and too eclectic. We have to still take that and shorten the curve so that it has a value. So that's what I meant.
I would say there's a people have different things that they respond to, right? As you're pointing out, there's truth in all of it, right? It's all valid on some level. There's something useful. And what my perception of it is it's like a certain, style of music. You might, gravitate towards country, which it's probably among my least favorite, right? Whereas, I like electronic music or whatever it is. It's like it flavors, and it's all just flavors of different things that resonate with a particular soul. And I think for a lot of people, it's like kind of opening up, figuring out, okay, this is the path. Now, what's my flavor? What do I resonate with the most? And many paths to the sort of same end goal. Would you agree?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I love supporting those other things. Like I have absolutely zero interest in country music or country western music, and yet I've had students a couple times, especially years ago. I remember one that was sent to me, the lyrics of one country song, and it was so incredibly powerful and deep. It was so beautiful. So it doesn't matter what you're, and I mean the song Gangster's Paradise, rap music. I'm not into rap music, but I can listen to Gangster's Paradise over and over because of the angelic choir they use in the background, and the words.
And you're a spiritual gangster.
Right, because the words are saying, what are we doing with all this violence? And so it's very, very powerful and effective. Beautiful. I like the lyrics. I like the melody, but I'm not into rap music. So that's right. You can find that beautiful kernel of, because I'm still going to look for spirituality. I love melody and all that too, but when something's got spirit to it, it totally,
I agree.
It totally has my attention.
I agree. If it moves me, I'm in. If it moves me emotionally, I'm in.
Right. There's a new song, by the way. I don't know if it's new. I'm sorry, but new to me, called "Good Good Father." I think the band that's done it most effectively I think they're called Fireflies or something like that. But but amazing. "Good Good Father." It's deep. It's spiritual, but it doesn't promote or push like you might expect traditional Southern Baptist-y kind of religion. It's about us and God, our relationship with spirit, and very inspirational. We use it quite often at Unity of Sedona, and but I love it. And at Unity of Sedona, the people there are everything from Native American tradition to pagan to Druids to 12-steppers and Course in Miracles, and I mean, they come, Buddhism, all kinds of paths. And one reason we're successful there, and that I'm there, is because when you're in Sedona, Sedona's like the, kind of the per capita, it's the most, I'm talking per capita, it's the most spiritual community or town maybe in the world per capita again. And I'm talking about more like spirituality, new agey spirituality, not traditional.
Not religion, right.
Yeah, it doesn't outrank, Rome for Catholics or anything like that. It's just,
right.
It's just for the new agey kind of stuff. And, and these folks, although it's small town and there's a little bit of competitiveness and kind of stuff that goes on with egos, it's still the people have heard everything. So when they wanted me to come here, I said, Sedona, I said, you guys are a little too eclectic. You enjoy studying anything just because it's the latest fad. If you want me there, you better recognize that if I come there, I'm going to be talking about connecting. I call it go vertical, reconnect with God, forget horizontal and study this, that, and the other. We're going to connect. I'll teach on every topic, which is what they dig because it appeals to them in different forms. But by doing every kind of conversation you can imagine and every kind of angle, it shows them that they could be into Buddhism, but they realize Native Americans are saying the same thing, and they realize that a pagan says the same thing, but in different words. So it makes them drop their guard about my thing is right. So we've taken the eclectic Sedona and made it even more eclectic, but in a sense that the eclecticism now melds into a oneness. And so it launched from the first day I arrived. I mean, we went from their usual handful of attendees to, getting to 100 and something, and then pretty soon 2 services of 100 and something. And it just kept growing, but not just because of popularity. The people that would want to attend because of a fad, they go, oh, I heard this guy's really amazing. Those people come and go because they're just shallow. They're just looking for a kind of a shtick or an angle, like this guy, everybody's got talking about him, so let's go see him, like I'm a freak show. I'm not interested in them, and they end up not interested in me because I won't appeal to that ridiculousness. The people that are really the most sincere and vulnerable and open to learning, that level of transparency, we all do it together. And I stand on that stage and I'll share anything they want to know of my personal life for that matter, because the goal is less, like St. Francis said, is one of his affirmations, less of me, more of thee. Which means, I become the thing I used to pray to. And not because of an arrogance. I'm not claiming to be or telling people to be this, I'm God kind of a thing per se. But I'm saying we're becoming the divine beings we were created to be. Jesus himself said, you are gods and goddesses, meaning you have forgotten your divine nature and you need to wake up to that again. The Buddha nature, some people might call it, but it's our inner divinity. A Christ consciousness would be an even better term for it, really. But that's my perspective.
Yeah. Well, it's one that I definitely resonate with, and I would say that it's sort of like as this, more and more people waking up. And of course, your book is a great title because I think a lot of times that's the first sort of inclination. It's like, well, hold on. Am I crazy? Am I losing my mind? Like, oh, no, you're waking up. And as more and more people wake up and there's sort of this spiritual revolution happening, I'm curious what you think is the cause of it. Why now? You hear different theories about entering new areas of space, for example, as we're on a spaceship, Earth, hurtling through the galaxy at tremendous speeds, and we're entering a new vibratory zone, and this is affecting our cells, which of course the physical being a mirror of the spiritual. And so curious, first off, would you agree, having been on this path a long time, like you have, would you agree that there's a quickening happening, there's a revolution happening, and what do you believe is the cause of that?
Yes, there's definitely a quickening happening. It's mentioned by Jesus in A Course in Miracles, by Edgar Cayce, by ancient peoples. That's what's kind of cool is that they're when you see all the greatest minds agreeing on something, the spiritual minds agreeing on something, then you really need to think twice that it's a probability to pay attention. The change of the millennium was a major thing. And people go, well, wait, at the change of the millennium, we were thinking there was going to be something called, this Y2K.
Y2K. Yeah.
And they thought, so that didn't happen per se. So therefore, the whole thing's bogus. It isn't, because within a year of that, we had 9/11. So these things are happening, but not always in the form people think. Nostradamus predicted that one of the beginnings of the endings is a major quake where we lose California. He predicts it, and the star alignments were the year of the Oakland quake. And he says specifically in his prophecy, there will be a stadium that will be filled up, that will be destroyed. And the stadium was, I think it was the San Francisco World Series was starting in San Francisco stadium. So it was to the T, except the amount of destruction, which tells us we can change things. But these changes happen. And when you do 2012 and the 11/11 convergence and the harmonic convergence, all of these things happening starting in the 80s, especially the year 88 was like a really major piece. 87, 88, that was a major turning point, then leading towards a grand cross astrologically in 99, I think it was, and in 2000, the change of the millennium, the events of 2001 in 2001, and then 2012. These are all happening so rapidly. They used to be 1,000 years for one thing like that to happen, an alignment or a major shift. And now, oh my God, these are all happening within 10 years and within one lifetime. It's just not ending. But even the 2012 thing, there is a major shift. And it sort of culminates in the idea that we are in an ascension process. And another part of this is we live in a symbiotic relationship with the earth. So if we're shifting, that means the earth is shifting. And so you might assume the poles are going to shift, and they are. Science finally, I don't even understand why it took them so long. I've been saying it since 80, but the poles are going to shift, and they are shifting. Finally, now it's becoming more common where science is saying, yes, the poles actually are wobbling a little bit, where it used to be like a top when you're spinning it fast enough, it stands up straight and spins. That's kind of
now it's starting to slow down.
And it's when it's slowing down, the vibrations in one respect, our electromagnetic field is slowing down. So it's starting to wobble, and could be the shift that we're going to experience, just a wobble, which means some climatic changes and so on. But if that wobble goes enough and the whole top falls over, then the poles completely reverse and we slide. We can, the whole crust can shift to where we're sort of upside down from our current position. It doesnent mean that everything dies on Earth, because it'll happen and it takes days for it to happen. But it would mean much of everything would be wiped and so on in life. But the point is that not destruction. The point is that if we change consciousness, then a pole shift would mean the Earth is going to match our new higher vibration, and we would go to a new level the easy way. If we don't do it the easy way, though, it will happen the hard way. So there is a shift happening, and the way I've described it sometimes is the bodies we inhabit are merely a manifestation, a crystallization of the way some animals or creatures have a shell. Our body is just a literal or three-dimensional manifestation of our consciousness. So as you shift consciousness, which we are doing, the body has to change. So that's another point to, you're not going crazy, you're just waking up. When you think that your body's doing things it never did, yeah, sure. Sometimes it's you've thrown your back out of place. Sometimes it's because you're getting older. I get that. But a lot of it isn't. A lot of it is unexplainable because it's the shifts in dimensions and vibrations. So we all have been vibrating the way you think of a computer program. You might have a certain server, or a program like 3.1, 3.2, and you go, it keeps changing, you get new programs. Our body has been three-dimensional, so let's say 3.0, for thousands of years. And maybe 3.1, 3.2 for some people, but we've been low on the evolutionary scale in the 3-point human density vibration program for a long time, and now
Right.
in just one generation we've gone what you could say 3.2 at best. We're already like at 3.6 now. And it's
Wow.
never shifted that much in one generation. It's never even shifted 2 points in thousands of years. It's
Right.
happening very rapidly. And it's going to come to an impasse because in our generation, we're getting to the point where the scales are going to tip. Is it going to happen the easy way or the hard way? Can we shift consciousness? And in my opinion, no, you're not going to suddenly get all these people with beliefs in differing nations and religions and terrorisms and all that. You're not going to get all of them to go, wow, we read this book by this guy named Michael Mirdad, and oh my God, we're going to give up all aggression, all hatred, and we're going to love each other. Do I think that's going to happen? No, it's not. The ego nature has everybody in a trance, and
Right.
the trance has to be broken. And it can be broken through awakening from the spell. Can happen through love, like in a fable where you see the princess is in a trance, she's in a spell, she's in a coma or whatever, she's asleep, and then love, the kiss, awakens her. It's like that. What awakens is forgiveness and love and, coming from a different place, but not by me complaining in the world and telling people we need to be more this and that or becoming political about it. It has to happen in me. I have to become a better person. Then I teach other people to become better people. And if you're not a teacher, it doesn't matter. You take this to your workplace and you just do your best to change people a day at a time and forget, how grandiose it has to be. It can be a day at a time on one level. On another level, there is a divine plan where all of those little efforts from people left and right add up to support some people with a bigger mission, whether it's the Peace Pilgrim, some people have heard of her, or Mother Teresa, or Yogananda, or you, or me, or whomever. It serves up some of the bigger things. Your program is not a program. It's not an intellectual, I think I'm going to do this program. Your program had to have started as an inspiration, and your program is themed on making a difference in people's lives instead of just conversation. And so it's part of a divine plan to shift everything. Can we shift it fast enough to keep it from happening the hard way, where we have to have earth changes and destruction? In my opinion, it's not going to go all smooth. There's going to be some drama involved in this, but I guarantee, and I have forever said, we're the generation that starts this, and many of us in this generation will see some of the biggest changes, and at the very most, 1 to 2 generations from now, and it's all done. It's all going to be complete.
Right. Now, would you agree with the idea of multiple versions of it, multiple realities? So let's say as you and I talk here now, I am focused in one way and you're focused in another. Let's say for you thought it was going to be all doom and gloom and all super negative and pain and suffering is coming. And I was saying, no, it's actually going to be, this smooth transition. And, and then of course, let's say, and this is just all hypothetical, but let's just say our ways of carrying ourselves in the world reflect those perspectives. So as a result, one being can sort of transition into an alternate timeline that is smoother, whereas another can transition into one that's much more difficult. And in a sense, it's like ships passing in the night.
Well, that's right. Would you? Because I think that's a very deep question and concept. Because what happens is, so using that analogy, let's say that the Earth is now, because we're in a symbiotic relationship with Earth. So as she's going to mirror us, we're mirroring her. So let's say that she, by and large, is going to shift another point or two vibrationally from 3.4 to 6, 7, and even a bigger shift. She's ready to go to 3.8. Well, now, if I'm really kind of a dense, angry guy, and you're totally doing your work and you're ready and you're prayerful on a regular basis and you're just really practicing this stuff, man. You're practicing love, forgiveness. Now, when she's ready to switch a part of herself to a higher frequency, she's bringing herself into 3.8, and I'm still acting like a 3.2, then I will be experiencing the destructive parts of the shift, and you will not. Even if we're in the same town, you'll just be immune to it because you will have shifted from, say, 3.6 to 3.8 with the planet, and you're actually going to you're going to become more ethereal. So you're not going to be as hungry as I am, who's out there looking for food because food's become scarce. You're not going to be as afraid. So you're not going to be as anxious.
Float above it to some degree. And I feel like this is it's sort of because there's a lot of people who have a lot of fear around these changes that are obviously happening. And I feel, from this perspective, I think it can really bring relief, understanding that, hey, I do have control over the version or the direct experience that I have. The world can be even crumbling around me, but, I sort of am floating over it, floating through it because of where I sit vibrationally. And I think that's a very empowering idea and concept for people to understand as we go through a lot of this turbulence.
Yes, and it's beautiful and it's vast. The topic is beautiful, vast, amazing, incredible, and yet, we can go there and we can study that, we can get ready, and all those things are fantastic. And yet, if a person isn't making themselves a higher consciousness right where they are, then it's like I'm saying to the people, hey, you know what? All these the folks that want to have gatherings, as though they're going to create this special little vortex doorway, and they're going to walk through into a higher dimension and leave everybody else behind. That's still the same kind of hateful thought as the fundamental Christian who says, I'm going to be raptured and you're all going to hell. It's not.
And I'm kind of excited about it.
Right, exactly. And it's not to help you say, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move to Sedona because Sedona is going to be a portal and we're all going to walk through it together into this higher vibration. Bottom line is, if you're not living it where you are, then moving somewhere else or wearing a certain color or, whatever it happens to be your thing is to be part of this change is really quite worthless. You have to be the change you want to see in the world. And if you believe that we're all moving into a higher dimension, what are you doing to act like a higher dimension? What do you do? And I'm not saying you have to make it a real guilt trip on yourself, but I'm saying, what are we doing? Are we, start off becoming a better partner? How about becoming a better parent? And that doesn't mean always being a pushover. When I say become better, doesn't mean like in spirituality, we often interpret a better spiritual, more spiritual person is always a pushover. I didn't say that at all, because I believe you should be able to do anything, including being spiritually inspired and kicking ass when you need to kick ass. You get up and move.
Self-respect, yeah.
It's time to move. If somebody's fallen down, you get up and help them up. You walk over and help get them. You don't say, well, it's all an illusion, and you don't just pray and chant yourself into oblivion, becoming some sort of bliss bunny. It's like, show up where you are, show up, be here. You're needed, and sometimes, if you're going through divorce, stop saying, well, Spirit will take care of me. And I know that I'm going to do great because, you know what? Also get a good attorney. Let Spirit help you get a good attorney, Be grounded. So there's an old saying, trust in Allah, but tie up your camel. It's an old Islamic saying.
Right. I like that.
Show up, man. Show up. Stop doing the, I just trust in God. Well, trusting in God isn't always being told not to do anything.
Okay, this brings up a question that I just got to interject because it's one that I've really battled with. When you say, trust in God but tie up your camel, I laugh, and I really like it. It's a funny saying, but it's something that I've really went back and forth with because, you think about it like this. Okay, where attention goes, energy flows, right? So if I give a lot of attention and energy to the idea that my camel's going to get stolen or my car's going to be broken into, then where do you draw the line between, sort of being safe and smart and giving energy towards a fear? And this is a very delicate balance. And it's something that I've contemplated quite a bit. What I've come up with is you have to sort of, find what ultimately, if something's going to make you feel good doing it, like locking your door, tying up your camel, whatever, then
Right.
do that, and don't give a lot of extra energy to it. But I think this is kind of an interesting, sort of sidebar topic, and I just curious because you mentioned it. I'd love to hear your thought on it.
Well, it's you know the truth, but respect the illusion. Know the
Right.
truth, but respect the illusion.
I like
Meaning,
that. That's good.
I know that I am safe no matter what, but I respect the illusion, because if I go ahead and I'll lock my car door. Now, why? Because I'm afraid. Well, if you are afraid, of course, that energy could move in that direction. But those kinds of sayings are getting a bit overused and misunderstood, because bottom line is, I am safe no matter what. I know the truth of who I am, but my safety does not lie in somebody not taking whatever it is, a soccer ball out of the back seat of your car when you went to play soccer with your friends, or tennis or whatever. My safety doesn't lie in that. So if you're going to say, well, I'm just going to trust, then if someone does take your tennis racket, you're going to be okay with that, right? Well, no, because then lock your dang door, So it's kind of like, know that you're safe, but respect the illusion, because you leave your car unlocked and you have something on the seat. You're actually potentially tempting people to want to take it because it's so easy. There's nothing wrong with respecting the illusion and saying, you know what, since my family for 5 members of my family have died because of the results of smoking, and I'm a smoker, why don't you just stop smoking? I know that in God there is no such thing as death, and there's no such thing as illness, and I know that cigarettes don't have power over you, but your body and your family genetics are going to tell you it sort of does, and your ego is going to subconsciously have you invested in that belief. So just respect it and play the game, play along. Like, I've talked about this many times over the years, but when people, try to push a certain, diet and that sort of thing, I say to people, ultimately it's an illusion, but yet I don't tell people what to eat. I don't tell them you have to be a vegetarian. I don't do that, because, the way I put it is I would rather be a loving meat eater than a judgmental vegetarian.
Right.
It's better to be the love, the consciousness is what matters. So if you believe that, I don't have to lock my car door, I think that's great for you to honor that, as long as you're not going to complain about it if somebody takes your car. So if you're going to complain about it, then that means you're being hypocritical. So just lock the dang thing so we can stop the conversation. It's like,
right.
It's okay to respect the illusion, to not jump off a cliff to prove that you can fly. You don't have to not eat properly, if you're having a problem with weight gain. There's nothing wrong with eating right. It's true that food doesn't have power over you, but you're not there yet. So just accept that. Just relax and accept that you're not totally there yet. So it's better to, with a smile and a little laughter, to say, wow, isn't this funny that on this planet we lock our cars? Isn't that kind of funny? Because in truth, we're all okay, and there is no such thing. There's no reason to believe that my car will get stolen. But since I'm on Earth and I'm not totally there, I'll go ahead and lock it. Just do it in a gentle fashion, rather than black or white thinking, like I must lock it or I must not lock it. Just find the calmness and the peace inside, and then do what's the greatest good. If you tend towards alcoholism, I'm not telling you that the alcohol has power over you, but go ahead and stay out of a bar. And if you are diabetic, go ahead and take your medicine. So my whole thing is about relax.
Find what eases the tension, right?
Right. Everything's got some truth to it. So your belief in sickness happens to be there, and so does your belief that there is no such thing. Which one is winning?
Right.
Well, if you're diagnosed as diabetic, then that one today is winning. So just play the game a little bit. In the back of your mind, know the truth that you don't have to lock your car, but go ahead and do it on the outside for the greater good.
Right. Yeah, I like that. That's a great answer and a great way to approach everything, right? How do I find this sweet spot to ease the tension and know that there's a bit of truth and a bit of untruth in almost everything, right?
Right.
All right. Well, now seems like a good moment to take a quick minute to tell those of you who aren't familiar a bit about our sponsor, Gaia. I've been a big fan of Gaia for many, many years now, which is why they are the only content provider I've ever reached out to in regards to potentially supporting the Positive Head podcast. So needless to say, I'm very excited they're now supporting the show. Gaia truly is my personal go-to source for streaming consciousness content on the web. They have an incredible 7,000 plus exclusive videos covering 5,000 years of wisdom. Just to give you guys an example, on April 24th on the show Buzzsaw, Dennis McKenna, who is the brother of the world's most well-known psychonaut, Terrence McKenna, makes a guest appearance to discuss the spiritual implications and mystical experiences that psychedelic substances can induce. I mean, it'd be pretty hard to be more up my alley, right? And as you all hear me constantly say, it's a daily conscious effort to maintain an elevated vibration. And if you're looking to go deep down the rabbit hole to do so, then Gaia is the best place I know of to do it, period. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. Love it. Love it. Well, you know, one of the things, Michael, that I love to hear about on the show is stories of synchronicity or serendipity or positive paranormal events. And my guess is you have more than one up your sleeve. So I would love to hear any story that you care to share that sort of fits in that wheelhouse.
Wow. You know, yeah, I mean, there would be no end to the story
the show.
of all kinds. But here's what I'd like to share. Instead of it just being a story of angelic communions and things like that, and visitations with spirit, and you know, all these wonderful things, those are all true and they do happen. And I've got some amazing stories. What I want to share is something a bit more humane to reach into everybody's heart. And it'll only take a moment. I just want to say this, that in everybody's life, we all go through cycles. And those cycles are essentially going to have lows and highs. But sometimes, a few times per lifetime, we all go through a low cycle that's not just another like bad day or bad weekend, quote unquote bad weekend. You know, it's not just a tough day. I've had a rough day at work. It's not like that. Every so often, our life cycles will come together where several areas of our life reach a low at the same time. Not one or two, but several. And that's called often the dark night of the soul. That's the name that old mystics gave it. The dark night of the soul is when a lot of things are going horribly wrong in your life. All of us, whether you're Jesus, Buddha, you or me, or you know, some saint, you know, a girl at work, you know, anybody, everybody, your sister, your aunt, everybody, we all go through it. Usually a few times per life, and it's the soul's way of trying to house clean and find all the unhealed pieces that we've left behind, little work we have done on ourselves but left pieces undone, or work we failed to do. It all will come every so often at the same time, and it's called the dark night of the soul. Just briefly, when that happens, there's descriptions of that in mysticism and in various traditions. You know, Buddha went through that when he's struggling to find the truth. What is the truth? And he's struggling. So he's fasting and starving and suffering, trying to find the truth. That's the dark night of the soul before his awakening. But notice that there's an awakening that comes after. Most human beings don't have a big awakening after, though. Even though it's there as a potentiality, it doesn't happen. Because if we go through the dark night of the soul in our life and all we do is complain about it, and all we do is call ourselves victims, then you will not have much of an awakening. Buddha stuck to his guns, and so he had a major awakening. Jesus' dark night of the soul, for example, is the persecutions and so forth, and then, you know, and torture. It all happens in a concentrated matter of days, which is very rare, but it can happen like that. It's usually going to last a few years in the average person's life. It did for Buddha, and it has for me, and so on. The dark night of the soul, what I'm saying, though, is it's described in various traditions. One description is, and man will cry for death, and death will not come. It means you're going through such a horrible period, you will either want to die, you'll choose to die, you'll suicidal or whatever, because things are that far gone. But you're also going to hear descriptions in various mystical writings, such as, even though I go through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil because God is with me. Or this too shall pass. So whether it's in the Torah or the Old Testament, the New Testament, mystical writings from men and women, Saint Teresa went through the dark night of the soul. Saint John of the Cross went through the dark night of the soul. All these various mystics, Western, Eastern, North and South, it's there and it happens. And what I'm saying is, first, the listeners can breathe and go, oh my God, I didn't know there was a name for what I did or I am going through.
Or I'm right in the middle of it right now.
Right. It's there's a name for it. It's okay. Breathe. You're not going crazy. You're waking up. This is a part of a process. And I'm really sorry that it's happening. I'm sorry in the sense that I feel for you. I really do. I went through one and and emerged from it just as recent as a year ago. And even though my life was great, you wouldn't know, I'm doing interviews, it's great. Still, you usually wouldn't be able to tell for me when I'm going through it, because I'm not going to bemoan it out there in the world, but internally and in my life circumstances, I can see it. So we're not immune to it, but how we go through it during the time, it really will determine how we come out of it. And each time I've come out of my cycles of the dark night of the soul, sometimes this corresponds with a astrological Saturn return, but that's just an aside for those who are into that. But the dark night of the soul, sometimes when we come out of that, and when I came out of it, it's I can say to you that there's nothing on earth that's more difficult to endure. Nothing as the dark night of the soul. And I would never wish it upon anybody. But there's nothing on earth that teaches you more, potentially becomes the better teacher. There's nothing that can take you faster when you come out of it, faster and more effectively, efficiently into a new life, if you do it well. So in the old traditions, you have to what's called die well. It's like being crucified and then resurrecting. So if you
it's like
don't
Charles Bukowski's book, I love the title of it. I haven't read it, but what matters most is how well you walk through the fire. I really love that.
So die well, the swan song of the Vikings, die well, So instead of when I say die, I'm saying you lose a job, you lose a relationship and this and that. Die well means, instead of just look what they've done to me, die well means I'm going to go inside and look at this. What is this about? Where's this coming from? It also means cry deeply, scream into a pillow, do some therapy, get to a 12-step program, do it well. Don't just sit around and bemoan it. Get in there and do it well. Process deeply as possible. Because if you do, then the dawn comes, the sun comes over the horizon.
Always darkest before the dawn, right?
And oh my God, that's exactly right. And over the horizon comes the sun, like the song "Here Comes the Sun." It's about. George wrote that about his friend John Lennon, who was an addict and he was deciding to kick heroin. And George partly wrote that about his friend, saying, "Don't worry, man. It's been a long, cold, lonely winter, but here comes the sun." It's just like us going through the dark night. I know the last year has been terrible, and I'm sorry, but you can do this. Hang in there, and that's what I call rebuilding a new life. That's why I've done talks and so forth on rebuilding a new life, because we can co-create a new life. I've done an online course on that, just consciously co-creating a new life, because that's what awaits us. And if you're trying new things in your life, my last thought on this, if you're trying things in your life and it's not working, none of these things are working, often it means you might be going through a dark night, because in the dark night, it's not a time to start new things. It's a time to die of the old things. So sometimes when you're frustrated going, I'm trying this and that, none of it's working, you might want to consider that you could be going through the dark night where you're supposed to be planting seeds, but not expecting a fruitful harvest yet, So
it's the dead of winter. Nothing's going to grow at the moment.
Right. Exactly. Thank you.
I love it. Well, Michael, this has been absolutely fascinating. I truly appreciate you taking the time to share some of your insights and wisdom. We are kind of getting down to it here, but I do have one last question I'd like to leave you with. I always like to ask, well, actually, before I get to that, what is the best way for people who want to continue to sort of lock into your work and follow what you're doing and see as you're putting out new books? What's the best ways for people to connect with you?
Well, you've got my website, which is michaelmirdad.com. You can go there.
That's Mirdad, by the way.
Correct. Mirdad, michaelmirdad.com. And you can go there and find everything from articles to products, all kinds of things, videos, whatever. And there's an online store there. You can even have an astrological chart done from that site on our online store, where you could, get a chart done. Like one of the great ones, man, is the karmic life chart. That one tells you a lot of the ups and downs of what you can expect in this life, your talents and so on. There's a numerology soul's purpose chart that really, or a numerology career chart that really can make a difference in knowing your direction, because otherwise you end up spinning wheels and burning energy in areas you don't need to be because you didn't have guidance on the right direction. So I love that we carry those kinds of things, but there's a lot there. And also I have a Facebook page, a public one. And then I also have a private one if people want to, get engaged more. It's a Friends of Michael Mirdad, it's called. And that one, we want to make it clear that anybody can request being a part of that group, private group, but we want to make it clear that that one's not just for people that are looking for Facebook friends or chit chat or because there's no venting allowed, there's no judging allowed, no, none of that stuff, no heavy politics and all. It's a place to talk and learn and grow spiritually, and we all do it. All the attendees in that group, all the people in that group participate. It's not like I'm there just teaching. Everybody's there teaching, learning. It's quite beautiful. So people can ask to be in that group, but they can also just go to my public Michael Mirdad, public Facebook page and kind of be kept abreast of everything. If they want to get on my mailing list, they can do that. Also on my website. And I do private sessions, and my tour schedule's there too. So every month I'm in a different city on tour for a week. And I do private sessions while I'm in those cities, but also on the phone. People constantly, every day of the week, I'm doing phone sessions as well as in person. So there's a lot available, and I would just say your show and my site that people can go to, and anything else. I will say this: everybody, please remember, feed your soul, not just your body. Feed your soul. Do things, choose things that are nutritious to your soul. Healthy relationships, healthy friendships, healthy books. Don't settle. Don't watch just any movie. Try to watch ones that feed your soul. Don't just listen to any show. Go to the ones like this when they're feeding your soul. So really become more efficient in your spiritual path, because time's running short. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It's there's so much coming at us these days that we can, focus on, and so many distractions and so many things vying for our attention. Choosing wisely, it's why I do the show 5 days a week. I say it's daily soul food for thought. Right? It's nice. It's putting this stuff into your mind, heart, soul, exploring it, dancing with it as often as possible, because of course, the more we do that, the more it integrates into our being. Right? And it is a journey. The path is the goal, and we're all on it, and we're all figuring it out. And I truly appreciate you, Michael, helping to illuminate the path. I do have one last question for you. What I'm wondering, in 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Michael Mirdad? There is no meaning, because life's an illusion. That's the first half of the answer. And then the other half is, but since we don't realize it's an illusion, the meaning of life is we have to remember who we really are. That's all we're here for. Love and forgiveness helps us get there, but we're here to remember. Beautiful. Thank you so much for helping us to remember, Michael. Until next time, journey well, my friend. Thank you, and many blessings to you. Bye-bye. Likewise. Well, everyone, that concludes this week's interview episode. If you have enjoyed this positive download from our hearts and minds to yours, please take a minute, give us a rating or review on iTunes, since iTunes is the holy grail of all things podcasting. Your good reviews help us to reach more listeners. Also, we would be extremely appreciative if you would tell your friends and family about the show. Our sincere intent with the Positive Head podcast is to spread positivity to the world, because we're selfish, quite honestly.
I say that jokingly, but really only halfway joking. I'm referring to the good kind of selfish based on the knowing that we all get what we give in this life, because when we give, we're actually always giving to extensions of self, since we're all really one in the same consciousness, just in different bodies. So if you want to be a good selfish along with us by helping to spread the positivity, by all means, please proceed to shout about the Positive Head podcast from your rooftop. Otherwise, as you continue on your fabulous journey in this 3D reality, be sure to remember this. As long as you ain't dead, you're already positive ahead. Journey well, everyone, and thank you for being.